We've been discussing why there's so much seeming apathy among young Christians, and we asked you students to come and comment on how you view that apathy, but also what God has done for you since you've been at Bob Jones University to change that. So who wants to start?
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned since being here is that I can personalize my salvation for myself and understanding the gravity of what God has done for me. And I think being a second generation Christian and having the Lord work in my life differently than my family and just seeing that difference and personalizing my salvation for myself and not just being my family and my parents, and just understanding that God has done so much for me that I have no reason to be apathetic toward Him.
Was there a moment where you say you personalized your salvation, where it became real to you or just became so spectacular that it radically changed your thinking?
Yeah, I took Life of Christ this semester, and we read a book that he was trying to figure out who God was for himself. And we were reading about the crucifixion again, and going over it again, I was just thinking about how significant it was that God turned his back on his only son, and how he did that for me. And that was my redemption that he did that for. And just understanding the gravity of that and the weight of my sin, because I think sometimes, especially being second generation Christians, we don't see our sin as being as great as, oh, he murdered someone, that's tragic. But we are just as bad as any other person. And I think that's where it really came down for me.
So it's a huge aha moment. Asher, you had mentioned something about the will. Explain that.
Well, if someone's disinterested in something, that's something that it doesn't start in their head, it starts in their heart. They are willing not to be interested, to be apathetic. And we are Christians, but as humans, we naturally do not choose the things of God. We have a predisposition to choose things of the world. And so as second or third generation Christians, many of us have never been exposed to that. We've been very sheltered, so there's a almost curiosity in some cases that makes us want to find out a little bit more. That's naturally inside of us.
Well, how did you matriculate to that point where you willed yourself to know God more, know God better? What happened?
Well, like Lydia said, in about 5th or 6th grade at home, I heard the story of the crucifixion, and it became very real to me. And there's been kind of stair steps along the way. I know here I've met a lot of good friends who are on fire, and I want that, and it's contagious. And it's probably the greatest way that I've been blessed by being here, is that you can meet other Christian young people who are imperfect, but they're trying to grow, and you can catch fire from them.
So one of the cool things about being at BJU for you was running into some authentic Christians that were inspiring. So.
And teachers. I think teachers play a big part. Because I always say when people ask me what makes Bob Jones, I think the teachers and their love for students and their willingness to get involved in your life and disciple you, and just sit down in an office and they put aside everything that they're doing, even if they're busy, and they want to have a face-to-face conversation and see how you're really doing, not just academically, but even emotionally and spiritually.
And Kara, you had mentioned that you felt like the cause of apathy was just not knowing God well enough. So how have you dealt with that since you've been at Bob Jones?
Well, I know one thing I really struggled with this semester, especially at the beginning, was just desiring God. And I've known God, like you guys said, for second generation or third generation even Christians. And so I've grown up knowing about God, but to actually know Him personally and know that all of those truths in the Bible actually apply to me personally, I really struggled with that. And so one of the girls in my discipleship group actually told me, well, one of my teachers said that if you want to desire God, pray and ask Him to give you that desire. So I did that, and he just started working different things out through teachers, through different extensions and other things like that, just to put in me a desire to know Him better. And like you said, Asher, the friends here Like,
So that was a discipleship group that occurs in the dormitories, in the residence halls. That's pretty cool.
I know for so many Christian young people, they really haven't had a chance to see the Lord work in a lot of ways, or they just haven't known that that was the Lord working on their behalf. And one of the ways that I've been blessed, and so many others in our stage of life, being at school, have really been changed, is that they've seen the Lord work on their behalf. I know college isn't cheap, and many people are working to pay for that, and they've seen the Lord provide from remarkable, unbelievable ways, and have just kind of stepping out on our own, have been forced to rely on someone else, not having our parents near us as we have had them. So we've kind of been forced to seek for someone else to rely on.
And Kara, you had something you wanted to add.
yeah, well, I was more going back to the learning from the teachers about our faith, and just how I had to take a trip home for something, and I was flying back, and I was on the plane, and I got to talk to another young person who wasn't saved, and it was amazing to see the difference between what he believed and what we believe, because one thing that he told me that stuck out to me was, in everything I see chaos. And that struck me as strange, because he's an engineering major. So I started talking to him about physics and about just all these mathematical laws that govern our universe, and how could there be such order out of the chaos. And that was something that I found to be very challenging for myself, just to know that there's people out there who really need the gospel and who really are lost.
And if I could add something on the end of that, before I came to school, I had always known that there were some things that were wrong, for instance, abortion, but I never completely understood why until you come to school and you hear these science classes, these teachers, and you hear the truth, which is so often hidden through all the technology that we have access to, and that's one way that really been changed.
Well, one thing that's been good in hearing you students speak is we've identified the problem of apathy, but then you guys have identified some strategies to combat that. And just to review, Ashley talked about seeing God move, and Lydia talked about personalizing salvation, and Kara talked about desiring to know God, and how if you look at God's creation and knowing God, knowing that the complexity, etc., I mean, you can't be apathetic about that. So appreciate you guys, appreciate y'all coming.